The first thing I noticed was the humming, not the low, ever-present thrum of the station's gravity stabilizers. I'd lived aboard Hestia Station long enough to tune that out, but a softer sound, almost melodic, vibrating through the thin walls of my assigned quarters. It reminded me of wind passing through a forest of hollow glass. I was halfway through unsealing my boots when I realized the humming wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from inside my room. I froze, one boot still half on, hand instinctively drifting toward the emergency baton clipped at my belt. Hestia Station was a multi-species hub, sure, but private quarters were sacrosanct. Accidental intrusions happened maybe once every few years, usually due to translation errors or outdated station maps. Still, protocol was protocol. I palmed the door control and slid fully inside. She was standing near my sleeping alcove. Tall, taller than most humans, but not towering. Slender in a way that suggested deliberate design rather than fragility. Her skin shimmered with an opalescent sheen, shifting subtly between pale blue and silver as the lights caught her. Long, dark hair, or something like hair, fell down her back in a smooth cascade, though individual strands seemed to glow faintly at the edges. She turned when the door sealed behind me, and smiled. Not a human smile, exactly. Her lips curved the same way, but there was a stillness to it, a confidence that made my spine stiffen. Her eyes, large, luminous, and an impossible shade of violet, studied me with open curiosity. I said intelligently. The humming stopped. I believe, she said, her voice smooth and perfectly translated by the universal calm embedded in my ear, that this is the correct location. I swallowed.
No, sorry.
This is definitely not. These are private quarters. You're in the wrong room. Her smile deepened. No, she repeated gently. I am not. I took a cautious step forward, keeping my tone calm. Look, if there's been a mix-up with housing assignments, station administration can. You are Ethan Hale, she said. I stopped. Yes. That's me. She inclined her head slightly, the gesture elegant. Then I am precisely where I am meant to be. A dozen thoughts raced through my head. Had I been reassigned? Was this some kind of cultural misunderstanding? Or worse, had I offended someone important enough that this was some kind of elaborate intimidation tactic? I think, I said slowly, we should start with who you are. Her eyes softened, as if amused by the suggestion. I am Leary of the Volari Concord, she said, and I have come to meet you. Hestia Station orbited a quiet yellow star, far from any major territorial borders. It was designed as neutral ground, a place where species could trade, negotiate, and coexist without the constant threat of political pressure. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, barely a century past first contact, and most of us aboard the station were specialists, engineers, diplomats, cultural liaisons. I was an engineer. A good one, apparently, though I never considered myself exceptional. I fixed things. I optimized power flows. I solved problems that other species found inelegant or overly complex. None of that explained why an alien woman from a major interstellar concord was standing in my bedroom, like she owned the place. Okay, I said, forcing myself to breathe. Let's assume you meant to find me. You still can't just walk into my quarters. Why not? She asked. I blinked. Because privacy? Boundaries? She tilted her head, considering. Your species places great importance on these concepts. We have studied them. Studied, I echoed. That's not the same as respecting. Her smile flickered, just for a moment, into something more human. Then allow me to apologize. I did not intend to cause distress. I sighed, some of the tension draining from my shoulders. Thank you. Now, why are you here? Leary glanced around my quarters, taking in the cramped space, the exposed conduits, the stack of data pads on my work table. You live very simply. Station housing doesn't encourage luxury. Yet you choose not to personalize it, she observed. Many humans do. I shrugged. I don't plan on staying forever. Neither did I, she said softly. That gave me pause. She stepped closer, not aggressively, but with a confidence that made it clear she wasn't worried about my reaction. Up close, I could see faint patterns beneath her skin, like constellations frozen in motion. My people, she said, are facing a crisis. Of course they were. They always were. The Volari Concord has resources, I said. Influence. Technology far beyond ours. Why come to a human engineer? Because your people see problems differently, she replied. And because you, specifically, have already changed the course of our future. I laughed, short and disbelieving. You've got the wrong guy. No, she said again. That word, spoken with such certainty, sent a chill down my spine. 3 cycles ago, you submitted a modification to a shared station protocol, a minor adjustment to power distribution algorithms. I frowned. That was just to reduce energy loss during peak cycles. Yes, she said. And when our vessels adopted that logic, it allowed us to stabilize a failing jump core. A vessel carrying over 2,000 of my people survived because of that minor adjustment. I stared at her. I didn't know anyone outside the station even saw that. We noticed, she said. And we began to look more closely at you. That explained the attention. It didn't explain the smile. The Volari were different. Not physically, though their bioluminescent skin and graceful movements certainly stood out, but culturally. They valued intent over action, meaning over outcome. To them, why you did something mattered more than what you did. Humans, as it turned out, fascinated them, especially humans who acted without expectation of reward. Leary stayed, not in my room, after I firmly insisted on station protocol, but in adjacent quarters, officially listed as a cultural observer. Unofficially, she spent most of her free time with me. She asked questions. Endless questions. Why did humans joke in dangerous situations? Why did we form emotional attachments to inanimate objects? Why did I keep a battered old photograph of Earth taped above my workbench? Because it reminds me where I came from, I said. And where is that? She asked. Home. She considered that for a long moment. Your species uses that word in many ways. So do yours, I pointed out. She smiled again. That same knowing smile that made it feel like she was always a step ahead of me. Over weeks, then months, our conversations deepened. We spoke of history, of loss, of what it meant to survive as a people. She told me of the Volari's long-lived stars and the quiet grief of watching systems go dark. I told her about Earth's wars, our mistakes, our stubborn refusal to give up. Somewhere along the way, the station stopped feeling so small. The crisis came without warning. A Volari delegation arrived under emergency status, their ships damaged, their diplomats tense. The Concord's core worlds were destabilizing, energy networks failing in ways their predictive models couldn't explain. It's like the universe is unraveling, one of them said during a joint briefing. I studied the data they provided, frowning. Your systems are too centralized, I said slowly. They're efficient but brittle. When something unexpected happens, it cascades. That is optimal design, one of the Volari engineers objected. It is elegant, I agreed. But elegance isn't the same as resilience. Leary watched me from across the room, her expression unreadable. What are you suggesting? She asked. I hesitated. A fundamental redesign. Decentralized nodes. Redundancy. Controlled inefficiency. The room fell silent. That would require us to abandon principles we've held for millennia, the Volari leader said. Or adapt them, I replied. You value intent. The intent is survival. Days blurred into sleepless nights as I worked alongside Volari engineers, translating human concepts into something their systems could accept. It was messy, inelegant, frustrating. It worked. The cascading failures slowed, then stopped. When the confirmation came, the Volari delegation bowed, deeply, formally. A gesture of profound respect.
Leary didn't bow.
She walked straight up to me, her eyes shining. You were never meant to leave Hestia, she said quietly.
What?
I asked. My presence in your room was not an accident, she admitted. I was sent to evaluate you, to determine whether the projections were true. Projections? That humanity, she said, would become a keystone species. Not the strongest, not the oldest, but the one others would rely upon when certainty failed. I felt a strange tightness in my chest. And her smile returned, but this time there was something vulnerable in it. And I realized I did not want to be merely an observer. The Volari Concord extended an offer, not to humanity but to me, a role as a permanent liaison, a bridge between ways of thinking. It meant leaving Hestia, leaving human space, possibly never returning to Earth. I stood in my quarters, staring at the familiar walls. Leary stood beside me, uncharacteristically quiet. This is why you smiled, I said softly. That first day. Yes, she said, because I knew you would tell me I was in the wrong room. And you knew you weren't. She met my gaze. I hoped you would see it too. I took a long breath. Humans had always been wanderers, survivors, builders of bridges where none existed. Maybe this was just another frontier. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Her relief was immediate, radiant. For the first time, her composure cracked, and she laughed, a sound like starlight breaking. Then, she said, welcome home. As we left the quarters together, I glanced back one last time. The room was empty, but somehow it had already served its purpose. The Volari vessel departed Hestia Station in silence. No ceremonial fanfare, no crowds, just the steady pull of artificial gravity shifting as the docking clamps released, and the stars outside the viewport stretched into pale ribbons of light. I stood at the observation deck long after the station had shrunk to a distant glimmer. I expected regret to hit me all at once, to feel the weight of everything I'd left behind crash down like a tidal wave. Earth. My parents' messages waiting unanswered. The familiar routines. The quiet anonymity of being just another human engineer among thousands. Instead, what I felt was clarity. You are not grieving, Leary said softly beside me. No, I admitted. I thought I would be. She folded her hands in front of her, watching the stars. Humans often mourn what they believe they are losing, not what they are becoming. That sounds like something you've been studying, I said. It is, she replied, and something I am still learning. Our quarters aboard the Volari vessel were unlike anything on Hestia. The walls responded subtly to presence, adjusting light and texture. The air carried a faint, clean scent, ozone and something floral I couldn't quite identify. For the first time since leaving Earth years ago, I felt like I wasn't just passing through somewhere. I was being invited in. The work began almost immediately. Volari systems were breathtaking in their scale and precision, but they still struggled with uncertainty, random variables, emotional decision-making, human-style improvisation. My role wasn't to replace their methods, but to complicate them in ways that strengthened rather than weakened. I became a translator of philosophies. Where Valari engineers sought perfection, I introduced tolerance for failure. Where they sought symmetry, I argued for asymmetry. Where they asked what is optimal, I asked what survives. At first, there was resistance, then results. Entire sectors stabilized. Trade routes reopened. Colonies once written off as doomed regained power and autonomy. Word spread, not just of my solutions, but of the approach behind them. Humans began receiving invitations, not demands, not contracts, requests. "We're being studied again," I said one evening, reviewing incoming messages from human representatives. "Yes," Leary said calmly, but this time with respect. I leaned back, exhaling. "That might be even more dangerous." She smiled. "Danger has never discouraged your species." Months passed, then a year. I changed in ways I didn't fully notice until I caught my reflection in one of the ship's mirrored surfaces. I stood differently, listened more, spoke less, but with greater certainty. And Leary changed too. She laughed more easily, questioned her own assumptions. She began visiting the communal garden simply to sit, something she once admitted felt unproductive. "I think," she said one day, watching artificial sunlight ripple across alien leaves, "that your inefficiencies are beautiful." I raised an eyebrow. "Careful. That's how it starts." "How it starts?" "Sounding human." She laughed, that same starlight sound I'd first heard months ago. "Then perhaps," she said, "that is not something to fear." The Valari High Council summoned us without warning. The chamber was vast, curving walls alive with living constellations, the presence of centuries of history pressing down like gravity itself. "You have changed us," the council speaker said, their voice resonating through the room. I stiffened. "That was never my intention." "Intent," Leary said gently, "is not the same as outcome." The speaker inclined their head. "Your presence has accelerated something inevitable. The Valari cannot return to what we were." I felt a flicker of doubt. "Is that a problem?" "No," the speaker replied. "It is a choice." They turned to Leary. "You were sent to observe," they said. "You chose to remain." "Yes," she said simply. "You entered a human's private quarters uninvited," the speaker added. I winced. "And discovered," the speaker continued, "that some doors are not opened by permission alone." The chamber fell silent. "We wish to formalize this bond," the speaker said. "Between you, between our peoples." I looked at Leary, my heart suddenly pounding. "You're saying," "We're saying," the speaker interrupted, "that humanity's place in the Concord is no longer theoretical." The decision was unanimous. Humanity would not be absorbed, dominated, or sidelined. They would be trusted. That night, Leary stood once again in my quarters. Not by mistake, not by assignment, but by choice. "You told me once," she said softly, "that I was in the wrong room." "I did," I said. "And I smiled," she said, stepping closer, "because I knew the truth." I met her gaze, seeing no mystery there anymore, only honesty. "You weren't in the wrong room," I said. "You were early." Her expression softened, something luminous and unguarded shining through. "And you," she said, "were always meant to open the door." The stars drifted beyond the viewport, endless and uncertain. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel lost among them. I felt chosen, not because I was special, but because I was human. And somewhere between a mistaken room and a knowing smile, the universe had decided that was exactly what it needed.